Hello everyone. Before the story start, tell me where are you watching from and what time is it?
The exhaustion was a physical substance, heavier than the humid summer air, a thick syrup in my veins that made every thought a struggle. The walk home from the clinic was only 8 blocks, but after the third, my legs refused. The news was not bad, not catastrophic, just a grinding, indefinite maybe that was somehow worse than a definite no. A suspended sentence. I needed to stop moving, to let the static in my head settle. I saw the little pocket park, a sad triangle of grass and a few benches trapped between roaring avenues. It was empty, as it always was at this hour. I sank onto the nearest slatted wooden bench, the warmth of the day still leaching from the wood into my back. I meant to rest for a minute. Just to close my eyes against the glare of the setting sun filtering through the smog. I fell asleep. Not a gentle drift, but a sudden, total system shutdown, as if someone had pulled a plug on my consciousness. I woke to darkness and a profound, disorienting silence. The rush hour din was gone. The sky was a deep, starless navy. The park's single, antique-looking street lamp at the far corner was on, casting a weak, buttery puddle of light that didn't reach my bench. I was in a pool of shadow. I fumbled for my phone to check the time. It was dead. Not out of battery, completely dead, a black slab. A tremor of unease, still fuzzy from sleep, passed through me. That's when I saw the flicker. It was the street lamp at the opposite corner of the park, across the grass. It wasn't flickering randomly. It was a sequence. A short pulse, a long one, two shorts, a pause. Then it repeated. Asterisk, dash, dot, dot. Asterisk. It was Morse code. My grandfather had taught me a little, long ago, a childhood game. This was a letter. R. As soon as I parsed it, the lamp went dark. Then the next one down the block, 50 yards away, ignited. It wasn't on before. It lit just to flicker. A different pattern. Asterisk dash, dot, dash, dot. Asterisk K. My sleep-addled brain clung to this puzzle, a raft in the strange quiet. Asterisk R, K, asterisk. The lamp went dark. A third light, further down the side street, bloomed to life. Asterisk dash, dot, dot. Asterisk D. R, K, D. Nonsense. Maybe it wasn't Morse. Maybe it was a faulty circuit, a power surge mimicking a pattern. But the timing was too deliberate, the pauses too crisp. A fourth light, this one on the main avenue, joined in. Asterisk dot, dot, dot. Asterisk S. R, K, D, S. My breath hitched in my throat. It wasn't random letters. It was a word, being spelled out one light at a time, in a relay across the sleeping city. RKDS. It needed a vowel. The park lamp near me flickered back on. Asterisk dot. Asterisk E. RKDSE. My mind rearranged it. Redsk. No dresk. The fifth light, a modern halogen on a pole by a bus stop, lit up. Asterisk dash, dot. Asterisk N. RKDSN. Dresden. The city was spelling Dresden. A cold that had nothing to do with the night air locked my joints. Dresden. The firebombing. The night of flames. A cityscape illuminated not by light, but by an inferno. And here was my city, dark and silent, using its streetlights to tap out the name in a ghostly semaphore. The lights stopped. The five that had spoken were now dark. The only illumination was the original, weak lamp on the park corner. The silence was absolute, a held breath. I sat frozen on the bench, the word hanging in the air between the black buildings. Asterisk Y. Was it a warning? A history lesson from the infrastructure? A plea? Then, the pattern changed. It started again, not from the beginning, but from the lamp nearest me. This time, it was faster, more urgent. Asterisk d dash dot dot. Asterisk R again. But then it didn't move to the next light. The same lamp flickered the next letter. Asterisk dot dot dot. Asterisk S. Then, impossibly, a third from the same fixture, asterisk dash dash dash. Asterisk O. It was spelling a different word, overlapping, from a single source. RSO. Others joined in, not in sequence, but in a chorus. Lights down the block, around the corner, in the distance, all began to flicker at once, each spelling its own frantic fragment. Asterisk dot dash. Asterisk A. From a neon sign above a closed deli. Asterisk dash dot dash dash. Asterisk Y. From a traffic signal, stuck on red. Asterisk dot dash dash. Asterisk W. From a porch light 2 streets over. It was a cacophony of light code, a desperate, overlapping broadcast. Letters tumbled over each other in the dark, A, Y, W, R, S, O, N, D, E, K. I clutched the edge of the bench, my mind scrambling to reassemble them as they flashed and died, lit and spoke. They weren't forming Dresden anymore. They were forming the components of it, the anagrams of destruction. Sword. Snow. Dark. Yearn. Works. Owns. Dreary. No. Each word flickered into existence across the tapestry of the night, a burst of meaning from a different point, then vanished. The city wasn't just saying, Dresden. It was deconstructing it. It was showing me the linguistic raw material of catastrophe. It was whispering all the words that could be built from the ashes of that one. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Every man-made light for as far as I could see went out. The park, the streets, the distant towers, all plunged into a blackness so complete it felt primordial. The only light was the faint, bruised glow of the cloud-covered moon. In that absolute dark, the meaning washed over me, colder than the void. The city hadn't been warning me of fire. It had been demonstrating its vocabulary. Showing me that within its grid of wires and bulbs lay the code for every disaster, every lament, every dark poem ever written. It held the pattern for Dresden in its circuits, and could tap it out on command. Just as it could tap out hope, or love, or my own name. The streetlights were keys on a typewriter that could write anything, given the right sleepless, vulnerable reader on a park bench. The lights snapped back on. All of them. Normal, steady, indifferent light. The hum of a distant air conditioner returned. A car passed. The world was back. I stumbled home, my legs weak. I didn't look at the lights. I know the truth now. The city is not inert. It is a sentinel with a perfect memory, and it communicates in the slow, patient language of electricity and shadow. It speaks to those who are still enough to listen, in the dead hours, spelling out not messages, but its own potential. It knows all the words. Even the terrible ones. And sometimes, when the conditions are right, it practices them on the dark, using the only voice it has, a chorus of flickering lights, telling old stories to anyone afraid of the silence. The insomnia had sanded the edges off reality, leaving me in a state of fuzzy, perpetual twilight. When sleep did come, it was a shallow, porous thing, more like sinking into a warm, murky pond than true unconsciousness. That's where I met her. Not as a person, but as a phenomenon. She was walking. Always walking. In a city that was my city, but warped, a familiar street would suddenly kink into a corridor from my old elementary school, a park bench would sit at the edge of a cliff overlooking the ocean I'd never visited. The geography of memory, jumbled and sutured together with dream logic. And she walked through it all. She was a silhouette at first, a woman in a long coat, her pace steady and unhurried. She never looked at me. She was just a moving part of the landscape, a constant. I'd be dreaming of arguing with my boss in a boardroom that had my grandmother's kitchen wallpaper, and I'd glance out the non-existent window, and there she'd be, passing by on a street that was both a foreign boulevard and the alley behind my first apartment. She was a stitch in the patchwork. Over nights, the dreams became more about her route than my own disjointed narratives. I started to follow her, a passive ghost in my own sleeping mind. She had a path. It was nonsensical but precise. She'd turn left from the fountain in my hometown square directly onto the grated metal walkway of a fire escape I'd climbed once in college. She'd descend a staircase that morphed into the carpeted hall of a hotel from a forgotten business trip, which opened onto the gravel driveway of my childhood home. She was navigating a map of my personal history, places I hadn't consciously recalled in years. And she was cleaning them. Not with a broom or a rag. With her passage. Where her feet touched the dream pavement, the cracks would seal, the grime would fade. A forgotten, peeling paint door on a shed I'd played in as a boy would gleam with fresh white as she passed it. A pothole on a rainy street from a miserable evening years ago would smooth over as she stepped around it. She didn't repair the places. She restored them to their ideal memory state, the way they felt in my haziest, most nostalgic recollection. The sun was always setting in these restored zones, casting a golden, forgiving light that never existed in reality. I began to crave the dreams. Waking life felt cluttered, noisy, sharp-cornered. But in the dream, following her, I walked through a sanitized museum of my own past, every artifact polished by her silent presence. The anxiety of my present, the debts, the loneliness, the quiet dread, couldn't touch me there. She was a curator, and I was the sole, grateful patron. Then, she looked back. It was on a street that was both the main drag of my university town and the industrial riverfront near my current office. She stopped, halfway across a bridge that was also a narrow footpath through a pine forest. She turned her head, just slightly, and her eyes met mine. They weren't dream eyes. They were clear, focused, and deeply, impossibly tired. In that look, I didn't see a figment of my imagination. I saw a consciousness. A weary, persistent intelligence moving through the ruins of my mind. She wasn't part of my dream. She was having her own, and I was the landscape. She turned and walked on, quicker now. The dream fractured. I woke up sweating, the impression of her exhausted gaze seared into me. The next time, I was ready. I dreamed I was in the back seat of my parents' old car, but it was parked in the vast, empty lot of the supermarket where I'd had my first job. She was walking across the asphalt. I didn't follow. I spoke, my dream voice thin and reedy. "Who are you?" She didn't stop. "The janitor," she said, her voice echoing as if from the far end of a long, tiled hall. "You leave so many rooms a mess. What do you want?" "A clear path," she replied, now at the edge of the lot where the asphalt bled into the sand of a childhood beach. "It's getting harder to walk. You keep piling things up." And then I saw them. Not in front of her, where her path was clean and golden, but behind her, in the wake of her restoration. The places she had cleaned weren't just pristine. They were empty. The restored shed had no toys. The freshly painted door led to a void. The smooth street had no cars, no people, not even discarded litter. She wasn't restoring memories. She was archiving them. Taxidermying them. And once she passed through, they were sealed off, static, no longer alive with the messy, painful, vital energy of true recollection. They were becoming exhibits. And her path was a trail of frozen dioramas. I woke up and didn't sleep for 2 days. I was terrified of dreaming, of seeing her fossilize another piece of my past. But exhaustion is a tyrant. I crashed. This time, the dream was simple. A single, endless hallway with doors on either side. The doors were all the doors of my life: my first apartment's cheap hollow core, my grandparents' heavy oak front door, the glass-paned French doors to a balcony I'd never had. She was walking down the hall, and as she passed each door, it would shine with a new coat of paint, its brass knob would gleam, and then it would lock with a sound like a vault ceiling. I was at the end of the hall, backed against a dead end. She walked towards me, not with menace, but with the dutiful resolve of a worker finishing a shift. The hall behind her was a beautiful, sterile, locked corridor. "Stop," I pleaded. "I can't," she said, her tired eyes on mine. "You called me. With all this unresolved space. I'm just tidying up. You're locking it away." "It's quieter this way," she said, now only a few feet from me. The door next to me, the one to my current apartment, scuffed and familiar, began to shine, the scratches vanishing. I did the only thing I could think of. I reached out, not to push her, but to the wall of the hallway itself. I focused not on a memory, but on a feeling. A recent, stupid, vivid feeling, the burn of embarrassment when I'd spilled coffee on myself in a meeting. A raw, undigested moment. The wall bulged. A new door formed, crude and raw, the wood splintered. Coffee-stained carpet spilled out from the threshold. The smell of burnt espresso and humiliation filled the hall. She flinched. A flicker of something like pain crossed her face. She couldn't clean that. It was too new, too sharp, too alive. It didn't fit her museum. She looked from the ugly, new door to me. For the first time, I saw something besides weariness. Frustration. "You'll just make more," she whispered. Then she turned and walked away, not through one of the beautiful locked doors, but into the wall between them, dissolving into the plaster. I haven't dreamed of her since. But my sleep is no longer a refuge. It's a construction site. I feel her absence, but I feel her work more. My memories are changing. When I try to recall my grandmother's kitchen, I see it perfectly, the sunlight, the checkered curtain, but I can't remember what we talked about. The memory is a postcard. Quiet. Beautiful. Locked. She walked through my dream, on a street made of half-remembered places, and she swept them clean of everything that mattered. Now I lie awake, clinging to the messy, painful, recent past, the arguments, the failures, the stinging embarrassments, because they are the only things vivid enough, ugly enough, to keep the walls of my mind from becoming a silent, gleaming, endless hall. It started with the exhaustion, a deep bone weariness that made the walk home from the late shift feel like wading through cold syrup. The city at 3 a.m. was a study in desaturated tones, the gray of wet asphalt, the dull orange of sodium vapor streetlights, the bruised purple of the sky holding the last memory of sunset. My route took me across 7 intersections, each with its own silent, cycling sentinel. Red, yellow, green. Red, yellow, green. A lullaby of stop and go for no one. I'd timed my shuffling pace to hit them all on green, a small, pointless victory in the empty night. The 7th intersection, where Grand Avenue met the abandoned railway spur, was always the darkest. The lights here seemed older, their illumination weaker, the colors tinged with a sickly brown. One night, my timing off, I was forced to stop as the light turned red. I leaned against the cold metal pole, waiting, watching the empty streets. The red light glared. Then it didn't change. The cross street's green held for an impossibly long 30 seconds. Boredom and fatigue softened my focus. I stared directly into the red lens. And it shifted. It wasn't a change to yellow. It was a change within red. The light deepened, becoming a color I had no name for, a red that was somehow velvety, liquid, like a drop of blood viewed in a dream. It pulsed softly, not with light, but with a sense of density. Then it cycled. Not to green, but to a color that was the absence of all color, a white so pure and hollow it made my teeth ache. It wasn't bright. It was void. Then came a green, but not the green of grass or safety. This was a poisonous, luminous chartreuse, the green of deep-sea creatures or irradiated glass. Finally, a yellow that was not a warning, but a deep, mournful amber, the color of forgotten honey or a dying star. The cycle took about 10 seconds. Red velvet, hollow white, poison green, morning amber. Then it snapped back to the normal, flat red just as the cross-street light turned yellow. I jerked back from the pole, my heart hammering. A trick of tired eyes. Staring at a bright light source creates afterimages, warps perception. I recited the logic like a prayer, crossed the street on the now normal green, and hurried home. But the memory of those colors stuck to the inside of my skull. They had a taste. The velvety red had tasted of copper and old roses. The hollow white was the taste of static. The poison green was the sharp tang of licking a battery. The morning amber tasted of dust and regret. The next night, I was afraid to look. I kept my head down until I was in the middle of the intersection, then glanced up. Normal red. I sighed, a mixture of relief and a strange, bitter disappointment. But as I stepped onto the far curb, a peripheral flicker made me turn. The light was cycling through the impossible spectrum again, faster this time, a silent, frantic strobe of dream colors for an empty audience. It was only at that intersection. I tested others. Normal. Only at Grand and the railway spur, in the deadest hour, when my weariness was a tangible shroud, would the lights reveal their secret palette. I began to stay later at work, just to be there at the right time of profound depletion. It became a secret pilgrimage. I'd stand under the light, and watch the show. The colors began to have textures. The velvety red felt like crushed petals against my mind. The hollow white was a cold, smooth marble. The poison green was the prickling, electric sensation of touching wet algae. The morning amber was the warmth of sun-baked wood, but a warmth that was leaving. Then, one night, the sequence changed. After the morning amber, instead of snapping back to normal red, it cycled to a fifth color. A blue. Not sky blue, or ocean blue. It was a blue so dark it was almost black, but it hummed with a deep, royal luminescence. The midnight blue. It tasted of ozone and silence. It felt like the space between stars. This was new. The system was expanding. Including me. The next development was sound. Not from the lights themselves, but in my head, synchronized with the colors. A low, cello-like drone for the velvety red. A high, ringing silence for the hollow white. A crackling, insectal buzz for the poison green. A soft, wooden wind chime tone for the morning amber. And for the midnight blue, a profound, resonant hum that vibrated in my molars, the sound of the earth turning. The intersection was no longer a crossing. It was a sensory chapel. And I was its only congregant. Last night, I reached for the pole as the cycle began. I didn't lean. I gripped it. The metal was strangely warm. The velvety red washed over me, and with it came not just a taste or sound, but a memory. Not mine. A flash of a woman's laugh in a crowded room I'd never seen. The hollow white brought a sensation of floating in a vast, soundless space. The poison green carried the sharp, acrid smell of factory smoke and a feeling of frantic industry. The morning amber filled me with a sweet, aching sorrow for a lost home I'd never known. And the midnight blue showed me the city. Not as it was, but as a living network of soft, glowing lines of the same impossible colors, pulsing under the pavement and through the bricks, connecting all the traffic lights, all the power lines, in a silent, thrumming circuit. The intersection was a node. A synapse. and I was completing a circuit by witnessing its true state. The light snapped back to normal red. The cross street turned green. I released the pole, my hand tingling. I understood now. The red, yellow, green, they are a mask. A simple, binary language for the crude vehicles of flesh and steel. But when the city sleeps, and the right kind of empty, receptive consciousness is present, the lights communicate in their native tongue. A language of color and frequency that carries the emotional and historical residue of the place. The traffic lights cycle through colors not found in waking because they are not for waking minds. They are for the city itself, talking to itself, and I, in my state of depleted, dream-adjacent awareness, had stumbled into the conversation. I cannot unsee it. The daytime world now looks like a lie, a simplified cartoon. I move through it, waiting for the deep night, for the exhaustion to pull the veil thin again. I am addicted to the secret spectrum. I fear the day the light cycles to a sixth color. What will it show me? What will it feel like? And more terrifyingly, what if it asks me a question, in that language of light and resonance, and expects me to answer? I am learning a vocabulary for which I have no mouth, and the lessons are becoming more vivid with every sleepless night. The nightmare wasn't a narrative, just a skyline. A city of impossible, knife-edge spires and sagging, organic domes, all under a bruised, swirling sky the color of a week-old bruise, a sickly mix of ochre and violet. Between the buildings swam shadows that weren't cast by anything, and the few visible windows glowed with a cold, sourceless green light. It was a city of silent, architectural dread, a place that felt wrong in its very angles. I woke with a ragged gasp, the sheets tangled around my legs, the taste of ozone and hot metal thick in my mouth. Dawn was just a gray suggestion at the edges of my blinds. The familiar hum of my refrigerator was a blessed, normal sound. I lay there for an hour, waiting for the afterimage of that terrible skyline to fade from the back of my eyes. It was still there when I finally dragged myself out for coffee. A dull, persistent imprint, like a watermark on my vision. I walked to my usual place, a corner cafe with large windows facing a brick alleyway often used by taggers. The city's sanctioned mural program was on one side, the other was a constantly evolving scroll of illegal art, crude tags, bubble letters, occasional elaborate pieces that lasted a day before being painted over. I ordered my coffee, my mind still sticky with the nightmare's residue. I turned to find a seat by the window, and my cup slipped from my hand. It hit the floor with a crack, brown liquid spraying across the tiles. On the alley wall, still wet, glistening under the weak morning sun, was a mural. It wasn't there yesterday. It was massive, covering a 20-foot span of brick. And it was my skyline. Every impossible spire was rendered in precise, aerosol detail. The sagging domes, the sickly ochre and violet swirl of the sky, the windows glowing with that same, wrong green. Even the non-shadow shadows were there, suggested by clever blasts of matte black against the brick's texture. It was a perfect, photorealistic translation of the city from my nightmare onto the wall of a downtown alley. The artist had even captured the feeling, the silent, crushing weight of the place. In the lower left corner, still dripping, was a small tag, Eidolon. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. The barista was beside me with a mop, asking if I was okay. I couldn't speak. I pointed a trembling finger at the window. She glanced out. Oh, the new one. Yeah, it showed up last night. Some crews really upping their game, huh? Weird colors though. She said it with the bland appreciation of someone who sees art as background noise. It wasn't background noise. It was a broadcast. And I was the receiver. I spent the day in a daze, circling the block, staring at the mural from different angles. It was no hallucination. It was paint on brick. Tourists took selfies in front of it. A city worker in a vest was already assessing it, likely for removal. But to me, it was a screaming headline in a language only I could read: "Your dreams are leaking." That night, I was afraid to sleep. I drank coffee until my hands shook, watching bad television. I must have dozed off in my armchair, because the skyline returned. This time, I was in it. Walking down a canyon between two of the knife spires. The green-lit windows watched me like eyes. I woke up screaming into the quiet room, my heart trying to punch its way out of my chest. It was 4:13 a.m. I threw on a jacket and ran to the alley. The streetlights were still on. The mural was there. But it had changed. In the lower right corner, where there had been just a suggestion of an alleyway within the painting, there was now a new, small, meticulously painted figure. A man in a jacket, looking up at the spires, his back to the viewer. It was me. My jacket. My posture. The artist had added me to the nightmare city, sometime between my dream and this moment. I backed away, my skin crawling. This wasn't coincidence. This was a conversation. My subconscious was the subject, and Eidolon was the stenographer. I became a detective of my own dread. I searched the name online. Nothing. A ghost. I started walking the city at night, in the hours when I should have been sleeping, looking for more. I found the second one a week later, in a storm-drained tunnel by the Riverwalk. This mural depicted a different scene from a subsequent nightmare, a vast, empty plaza within the impossible city, with a single, pulsing red orb floating in its center. The tag was the same, Eidolon. It was fresh. The smell of spray paint still hung in the damp air. The nightmares grew more frequent, more vivid, as if encouraged by the validation. A labyrinth of mirrored corridors. A garden of black, singing crystal. Each time, I'd wake, and within days, sometimes hours, I'd find the scene rendered somewhere in the city's underbelly, on the side of a derelict warehouse, under a bridge, on the rolling security door of a garage. Always impeccably detailed, always tagged. Eidolon. The dream painter. I tried to intercept them. I'd stake out areas due for graffiti, places with fresh, buff coats from the city's cleanup crews. I never saw a soul. The art just appeared, fully formed, between one empty night and the next dawn. It was as if the act of my dreaming summoned it into physical existence. The horror has shifted. It's no longer about the nightmares themselves. It's about the curation. My deepest, most private fears are being collected and displayed in public. Eidolon isn't just recording them, they're framing them. Giving them weight, permanence. Making them real in a way a fading dream memory never is. When I see the mural of the singing crystal garden, I don't just remember the nightmare, I remember the cold sweat, the specific pitch of the crystal's hum, the feeling of my sanity fraying, all of it comes rushing back, solidified by the paint. Last night, I dreamed the worst one yet. I was in a small, gray, featureless room within the impossible city. There was a door. And I knew, with dream certainty, that on the other side of that door was the artist. Eidolon. I reached for the handle. I woke up before I touched it. My hand was outstretched in the dark of my bedroom. It was 3 a.m. I didn't go out looking. I knew. I found it this afternoon, in the long-neglected pedestrian tunnel that connects two subway stations. A small, simple mural on the grimy tile. Just a gray door, perfectly rendered in perspective. And on the floor in front of it, painted with stunning realism, was the shadow of a person about to turn the handle. The shadow was mine. The tag was there, smaller than usual, next to the doorframe, Eidolon. It's an invitation. Or a finale. The graffiti is no longer just depicting my nightmares. It's depicting my interaction with them. It's documenting my pursuit. The next mural, I fear, won't be a skyline or a room. It will be a portrait. And it will be the last one. Because either I open that painted door in the real world, to find out who or what is on the other side, or I stop dreaming altogether. And I don't know which prospect is more terrifying, meeting the architect of my own private hell, or having the art stop, leaving me alone in a waking world that now feels like the real dream, while my nightmares hang, immortalized in alleyways, for everyone to see but me to understand. The dream was always the same, a relic from the bad year after the divorce. I'm in a house that is both my childhood home and a maze of endless, unfamiliar rooms. The air is thick with the smell of rain and ozone. I'm searching for something, a key, a letter, my own name, but every drawer I open is empty, every door leads to another shadowy corridor. The only sound is the distant, rhythmic thud of a heavy door swinging on its hinges in a draft I can't feel. I run, the carpet swallowing my footsteps, until I find myself in a small, glass-walled sunroom. On a wicker table lies a small, ornate music box, its mother-of-pearl inlay cracked. I reach for it, and as my fingers brush the cold surface, the whole room, the house, the dream, shatters. Not with a sound, but with a silent, catastrophic unmaking, like a pane of glass webbed with fractures and then dissolving into glittering dust. I always wake then, gasping, my hands curled into claws, the phantom sensation of shards prickling my skin. I'd been free of it for months. Then, last Tuesday, it returned with a vicious clarity. The shattering was so visceral I sat bolt upright in bed, my palms stinging. It was 4:17 a.m. The apartment was a tomb. I needed air, movement, anything to outrun the aftertaste of dissolution. I threw on clothes and walked the 7 blocks to the little riverside park, a strip of concrete and sickly grass they called it the Greenway. The pre-dawn world was monochrome, the river a slab of polished lead. I sat on my usual bench, the one facing the water, and tried to breathe the dream out of my lungs. That's when I saw her. She was standing at the far end of the bench, perfectly still, as if she'd been waiting. A woman in a long, dark gray coat, her hair the color of the ash sky. She wasn't looking at the river. She was looking at her hands, which were cupped together as if holding something delicate. The weak light from a distant security lamp gleamed on an object resting in her palms. It was a shard. A jagged, palm-sized piece of something that looked like smoked glass or dark mother-of-pearl. And etched onto its surface, in fine, silvery lines, was a map. I could see it clearly from 10 feet away, the twisting corridors, the dead ends, the central sunroom. It was the floor plan of the house for my dream. My dream house. My breath froze in my chest. A coincidence. A trick of sleep-deprived eyes. She was just some weirdo with a piece of trash. I forced myself to look away, at the river, but my peripheral vision was locked on her hands. She turned the shard slowly, and the map shifted, showing a different level, a basement I'd only glimpsed in the nightmare once, filled with silent, sheet-covered furniture. A low, involuntary sound escaped my throat. She looked up. Her eyes met mine. They were a pale, watery gray, utterly calm, and deeply knowing. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She simply extended her cupped hands towards me, offering the shard. I recoiled, pressing back against the cold slats of the bench. "What is that?" My voice was a dry rasp. "A piece of it," she said. Her voice was soft, matter-of-fact, like a librarian pointing out a reference section. "You keep breaking it. It's hard to navigate when it's in pieces." "It's a dream," I whispered, the word feeling absurd in the concrete reality of the park. "Is it?" She tilted the shard. The silvery lines on it seemed to glow faintly from within, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. "It has geography. It has rules. You get lost in the same places every time. The corridor by the grandfather clock. The landing with the warped floorboard." She named them. Places I had never described to anyone, because they were meaningless. "You break it at the music box. Every time." This, she said, nodding at the shard, is the fragment with the sunroom. I've been collecting the others. Who are you? A cartographer, she said. Of sorts. Your dream is persistent and damaged. It keeps spilling. The word spilling did it. The phantom prickling in my hands intensified. I saw, in my mind's eye, the glittering dust of the shattered dream not dissolving, but falling, seeping out of my sleep and into the world. And this woman, this cartographer, was gathering the pieces. Why, was all I could manage. She looked down at the shard, her expression one of professional concern. It's a stable location. Rare, in the subjective realms. Most are fluid. Yours is fixed. But it's fragile. The break is a trauma loop. Until it's mended, it will keep fracturing, and the pieces, she looked around the gray park, find their way out. They're attracted to loci of quiet despair. Like this bench. She took a step closer. I could see the map in terrifying detail now. There, by the drawn X of the sunroom, was a tiny, glittering fissure, the point of breakage. I can put it back together, she said. But I need you to stop breaking it. You have to find what you're looking for. Or stop looking. I don't know what I'm looking for. Then you must learn to be lost without panicking, she said, as if instructing a child in a simple task. Walk the halls. Sit in the rooms. The dream isn't trying to hurt you. It's waiting for you to understand it. Every time you run, every time you reach for the unattainable object, you stress the structure. You cause a fault. She tapped the shard with a fingernail. This is a fault line. She placed the shard carefully on the bench beside me, not in my hand, but on the cold wood. Hold on to this piece. It's the anchor. The next time you're there, don't run to the sunroom. Don't touch the box. Just be. The map will guide you back to the places you've been avoiding. Before I could respond, she turned and walked away, her coat blending into the gloom until she was just another shadow swallowed by the dawn. The shard was real. Cold and solid. I picked it up. The etched lines were slightly raised under my thumb. It was a map of my own private hell. I put it in my pocket. It felt like carrying a loaded gun. That was 3 nights ago. I have not dreamed of the house since. I am afraid to sleep. I keep the shard in a drawer, but I feel its presence, a cold, geometric weight in my apartment. I have taken it out, studied it. I know the layout now better awake than I ever did asleep. The cartographer was right. I always avoid the east wing. There's a room there on the map, unlabeled, that I have no memory of. She stood at the foot of the bench, holding a piece of my broken psyche like a surveyor's plat. She has forced a terrible choice upon me, re-enter the nightmare consciously, armed with its map, to try and heal it, or live with the knowledge that it is a real, fragile place that is cracking, and its debris is littering my waking world, collected by silent, gray-coated archivists of the interior. My dream is no longer mine. It's a location. And I am its negligent caretaker, visited by inspectors from a department I never knew existed. The line between dreaming and waking has not blurred, it has developed a border, and this shard of mother of pearl and memory is my passport. I don't know if I'm brave enough to use it. The insomnia was a new breed. Not the frantic, heart-pounding kind, but a thick, woolly resistance, as if the very concept of sleep had become a distant, uncooperative country. I'd lie in the dark, my body leaden, my mind a flat, gray plane, not tired enough to descend, not awake enough to rise. The night stretched into a featureless, silent terrain. The city outside my window was no help, its usual midnight symphony of sirens and distant engines seemed muted, subdued, as if it too was caught in the same lethargic tide. It was on the 4th such night that I noticed the dawn was wrong. I'd finally slipped into a thin, unsatisfying doze around 5, only to be pulled back to the surface by a faint gray light at the edges of the blinds. I dragged myself to the window, expecting the usual slow bleed of color, the indigo to violet to a thin, watery gold. But the light wasn't spreading. It was stagnating. A uniform, pewter gray pall hung over the buildings, with no discernible source. No pink tinge in the east. No deepening blue in the west. Just an even, dismal gray, like a sheet of dirty muslin had been pulled over the sky. I checked the time. 6:45 a.m. The city should have been waking. But the streets were still, the traffic lights cycling for no one. A single car moved down the avenue, its headlights still on, cutting weak cones through the stubborn gloom. It moved slowly, uncertainly, as if the driver was also unsure if night had truly ended. I went outside. The air was dead. Not cold, not warm. It had no character. It didn't smell of dew or exhaust or morning coffee from the bakers down the block. It smelled of nothing. Of closed rooms. My footsteps on the sidewalk sounded muffled, absorbed. The dawn was not breaking. It was stirring. Reluctantly. Heavily. As if it had been roused from the same profound, unwelcome sleep that held me. I walked to the little park at the end of my street. The birds were silent. Not a chirp, not a rustle in the bare branches. A squirrel, usually a frantic morning blur, sat motionless on a fence post, its head drooping, its eyes half-lidded. It looked exhausted. The grass was a dull, matted green, devoid of sparkle from any dew. The whole scene looked like a photograph of a morning, not the morning itself. A man walked his dog. The dog, a normally exuberant terrier, plodded beside him, head down, barely sniffing the ground. The man's face was pale, his movements sluggish. We made eye contact as we passed. His eyes were the same as mine felt, gritty, unfocused, burdened by a sleep that hadn't refreshed. He gave a slight, weary nod, a silent acknowledgement of the shared weight. No, good morning. It wasn't good, and it wasn't morning. Not really. I returned to my apartment as the gray light finally began to intensify, not into sunlight, but into a slightly brighter, but still sourceless, white gray. It was 8:30. The world was moving now, but in slow motion. Cars drifted. Pedestrians shuffled. The coffee shop across the street had its open sign lit, but no one stood in line. The barista inside moved with a dreamlike languor, wiping the counter in slow, endless circles. The day never truly arrived. The white-gray ceiling remained. Shadows were faint, diffuse smudges. At noon, it felt like a perpetual, weary late afternoon. My own body refused to sink. Coffee had no effect. Food tasted like paste. My thoughts were slow, syrupy. I tried to work, but the words on my screen swam, refusing to coalesce into meaning. It was as if the fundamental engine of daytime, clarity, purpose, metabolism, was failing to turn over. By 3 p.m., a deep, inappropriate drowsiness pulled at me. Not a healthy tiredness, but the same thick resistance from the night, now invading the day. I fought it, pacing my apartment. On the street below, I saw a delivery van double-parked, the driver asleep with his head against the window. A woman on a bench had nodded off, her grocery bags slumped beside her. The city wasn't waking up. It was falling back asleep in shifts, unable to sustain the effort of consciousness. The horror wasn't in the darkness. It was in the half-light. The perpetual, heavy-lidded in-between. We were all trapped in the collective yawn of a universe that couldn't be bothered to fully wake. The dawn had come slowly, matching our internal rhythm, and in doing so, it had revealed a terrible truth: our alertness, our day, was not a default state. It was a fragile agreement, a chorus we all had to sing in unison. And the chorus was failing. We were losing the will for daytime. Nightfall brought no relief. The gray simply deepened back to black, but a soft, velvety black, not the sharp, star-pricked darkness of before. It felt like being tucked back into the same heavy blanket. I lay in bed, not fighting sleep, but dreading the next gray, reluctant stirring. The line between sleeping and waking had dissolved. We were all in a shared, somnolent daze, a citywide hibernation from which none of us had the energy to truly emerge. I write this now under the same even, indifferent gray. It is, according to the clock, 10 a.m. But time has lost its anchor. There is only this, the heavy sleep, the reluctant rousing, the endless, gray exhale of a world that is forgetting how to be awake. And we are forgetting with it, our dreams seeping into our days, our waking thoughts fogged with the residue of a sleep that never ends, only thickens and thins, but never breaks. We are waiting for a sunrise that may not have the strength to come, in a dawn that lingers like a sigh at the foot of the bed, asking for just 5 more minutes, forever. The silence in the apartment after the fight was a physical presence, a third occupant sitting between us on the sofa, swollen and mute. Lena had finally cried herself out, her quiet sobbing giving way to a hollow, exhausted stillness. We'd said everything, and nothing. The future lay in shards at our feet. She stood up, a movement so weary it seemed to cost her dearly, and went to the window, looking down at the midnight street. The city's usual nighttime murmur, the distant snarl of a garbage truck, the bass thump from a passing car, felt like an intrusion, a crude noise violating our private ruin. Then, she began to hum. It was so soft I almost didn't hear it at first. A simple, tuneless little melody, 3 notes up, 3 notes down, a cadence as old as rocking cradles. It wasn't for me. It was for herself. A primal, self-soothing sound, the last defense against the crushing quiet. She hummed it into the glass, her breath fogging a small circle. And the city answered. Not with sound, but with a change in its existing sound. The ever-present, subliminal hum of the electrical wires outside our window, a sound so constant I'd learned to ignore it years ago, shifted. Its pitch altered, subtly at first, then more distinctly, to match her 3-note pattern. Asterisk up, up, up. Down, down, down. Asterisk the 60-cycle drone of the transformer on the pole across the street warped, becoming a deep, resonant bass note that underpinned her fragile melody. The whine from the neon sign of the all-night diner down the block softened from a sharp buzz into a wavering, melodic sigh, harmonizing. I sat up straight, the emotional wreckage of our fight momentarily forgotten. Lena. Do you hear that? She didn't turn. She kept humming, lost in her grief. But as she continued, the city's chorus grew. The hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen joined in, its motor purring in a lower octave. The distant, rhythmic thump-thump-thump of a compressor on a rooftop somewhere fell into time, becoming a soft, percussive heartbeat. It wasn't an echo. It was an accompaniment. The entire electrical and mechanical nervous system of our block was tuning itself to her sadness, providing a sonic blanket for her desolation. She stopped humming. The city sounds hesitated, then slowly, reluctantly, slid back to their normal, discordant drones and rattles. The silence rushed back in, colder than before. What was that? She whispered, finally turning from the window. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with something beyond our marital grief. I don't know. We went to bed without another word, lying back to back, miles apart in the narrow bed. An hour later, I heard it again. Fainter this time. She was humming in her sleep, a broken, hiccuping version of the lullaby. And from the walls, from the floor, from the very air of the building, came the responsive hum. The wiring in the walls sang a thin, high harmony. The water in the pipes sighed in time. It was a private, sorrowful concert for an audience of one. The next day, we moved through the apartment like ghosts, avoiding each other, avoiding the memory of the shared, impossible sound. But that evening, as dusk fell and the city's electronic pulse grew more noticeable, Lena, washing dishes at the sink, began to hum again, almost unconsciously. This time, it was a different tune, something from her childhood, a folk song her grandmother sang. And again, the city answered. The streetlight outside our window, which usually buzzed angrily, began to pulse its light in time with the melody, a gentle, visual throb. The traffic signal at the corner, changing from red to green, did so with a soft, melodic chime instead of its usual click. It was beautiful. And it was the most terrifying thing I had ever witnessed. Her emotional state was conducting the infrastructure. Her internal weather was dictating the city's ambient noise. We became afraid of her own voice. She tried to suppress it, biting her lip when a tune threatened to bubble up. But grief, or joy, or simple habit, would find a way. A sigh would turn melodic, and the bedside lamp would dim to a warm, sympathetic glow. A frustrated hum while looking for her keys would make the hallway light flicker in agitation. The city wasn't just responding. It was empathizing. And its empathy was a feedback loop. Her sadness would make the wires drone a mournful dirge, which would deepen her sadness. A moment of fleeting contentment, hummed absently, would make the appliances purr a cheerful tune, briefly lifting her spirits. She was in a symbiotic, parasitic relationship with the grid. Her soul had a direct line to the power mains. The breaking point came last week. She had a moment of pure, unadulterated joy, a call from an old friend, news of a pregnancy. She laughed, a bright, clear sound, and then hummed a snatch of a celebratory song. The apartment erupted. Lights brightened to a blinding, festive intensity. The oven clock played a jingle. The fire alarm let out a single, triumphant beep. And from outside, a symphony of car alarms, triggered not by impact, but by sympathetic resonance, began to whoop and wail in a crazed, jubilant cacophony down the entire street. It lasted 10 seconds. Then, as her hand flew to her mouth in horror, it all cut off, leaving a ringing, violated silence. The neighbor started pounding on the wall. Now, we live in a tense, silent pact. We communicate in whispers and notes. Music is forbidden. Even rhythmic tapping is dangerous. The city hums its own, indifferent tune outside, but we dare not join it. Lena has become a vessel of terrible power. A single, happy thought could trigger a blackout. A sob could brown out the block. She is a human tuning fork for the metropolis, and the weight of that responsibility is crushing what's left of her spirit. We are prisoners of quiet. The most intimate, personal expression, a hummed lullaby, has become a public utility event. And sometimes, in the deepest part of the night, I hear the city humming to itself, a lonely, aimless tune, searching for its conductor, wondering why the music has stopped. The exhaustion wasn't the satisfying kind that follows hard work. It was a seepage, a slow leak of vitality that had been going on for months, maybe years. My life had become a flat loop, the gray cubicle, the fluorescent buzz, the commute on the bus that smelled of damp wool and despair, the silent apartment that echoed with things I hadn't said. I moved through it all with a leaden inertia, my body obeying commands issued from a great, numb distance. My thoughts were slow, syrupy things. Even blinking felt like an effort. It was on a Thursday, walking home under a sky the color of dishwater, that I first really saw my shadow. The late afternoon sun was a weak, lemon-yellow smear in the west, casting long, distorted silhouettes across the pavement. Everyone else's shadows were crisp, energetic things, stretching eagerly ahead of them, keeping pace with purpose. Mine was different. It lagged. It stretched out behind me, long and thin, but it didn't just lie there. It seemed to cling. When I took a step, my shadow's foot would lift a fraction of a second later, with a visible reluctance, as if pulling itself from sticky tar. It didn't snap to my heel, it oozed. Its edges were soft, blurry, lacking the sharp definition of the other shadows on the street. It looked tired, Not just long, but weary, its form slumped and elongated with a profound fatigue that mirrored my own. I stopped. My shadow stopped, but it settled slowly, pooling around my feet like a liquid too thick to hold its shape. I took a few experimental steps forward. It followed, but with a dragging hesitation, its connection to my feet seeming tenuous, strained. It was like trying to walk with a heavy, waterlogged coat trailing behind me, a coat made of darkness. A strange, possessive pity stirred in my chest. This wasn't just an absence of light. This was a portrait. A diagnosis written in silhouette. "See," it said. Asterisk, this is the weight you carry. This is your exhaustion, given form. Asterisk, I started paying attention. In the harsh, vertical light of noon, my shadow was a shrunken, compact puddle at my feet, but even then, it seemed denser than it should be, a clot of gloom. Under the sterile fluorescence of my office, it was faint, but it pooled directly beneath my chair, a small, dark stain I couldn't escape, while my colleagues' shadows were cast crisply against the wall as they moved. Mine didn't want to move. It wanted to rest. The disconnect grew. My body would force itself into motion, to the printer, to the break room, but my shadow would drag, stretching thin and pale across the carpet, as if begging me to stop. Walking home became a silent argument. "Come on," my legs would say. "No," my shadow would reply, clinging to the cracks in the sidewalk, lingering in the cool patches of shade under awnings. I began to feel the resistance not as a visual phenomenon, but as a slight, tangible tug at my ankles, a gentle, persistent gravity urging me to be still. One evening, in the long, golden light of a dying sunset, I sat on a park bench, too tired to take the final 2 blocks home. I watched my shadow. It lay across the gravel path, longer than I was tall, its head resting against the trunk of a maple tree, its body a languid, dark river. It looked peaceful. More than that, it looked right. This elongated, resting form seemed more authentic than the upright, tense silhouette I forced it to make during the day. This was its true state. This was my true state, horizontal, extended, at rest. I didn't want to get up. Getting up would mean coercing that peaceful darkness back into the cramped, upright fiction of a functioning person. The thought was unbearable. So I sat. And as the sun dipped lower, my shadow stretched further, merging with the general dusk, becoming less my shadow and more just a part of the gathering night. It was dissolving. And with it, the urge to move, to be a discrete, active thing in the world, dissolved too. A street lamp flickered on. My shadow, now cast by this new, artificial source, snapped back to me, a small, sharp, startled thing under the bench. It was a betrayal. The natural dusk had been a release, the electric light was a cage. Now, I am careful with light. I avoid the midday sun, which creates a demanding, short shadow. I crave the long, forgiving light of dawn and dusk, where my shadow can stretch out and express its true, tired length. I move slowly, so as not to tear it. I feel a greater kinship with this flat, dark doppelganger than with the reflection in the mirror. The reflection shows the face I maintain for the world, pale and composed. The shadow shows the truth, a being stretched to its breaking point, clinging to the earth, reluctant to take another step into the blinding, demanding light of another day. We are in agreement, my shadow and I. We are tired. And we are slowly, quietly, going on strike. The only thing left to negotiate is the final surrender, when the light fails entirely, and my shadow no longer has to struggle to keep up, because there will be nothing left to cast it, and I will be, at last, as still as it always wanted me to be. It began as a game, a desperate one, in the long, hollow hours after my grandmother's funeral. The house was full of murmuring ants and the smell of cold casseroles, a kind of soft, suffocating noise. My cousin Alara, whom I hadn't seen in a decade, stood apart by the grand bay window, her back to the room, a silhouette against the gray afternoon. She was always the strange one, the quiet one who went to art schools in distant countries and sent back cryptic postcards. I drifted over, needing an anchor outside the tide of collective grief. "They're all telling stories about her," I said, just to say something. Remembering. Elara didn't turn. "Memory is a spotlight," she said, her voice low. "It only illuminates what it's pointed at. And it leaves everything else in deeper shadow." She finally looked at me. Her eyes were the same clear gray as the sky outside, but older, tired. "Watch." She lifted a hand, not dramatically, but with a weary precision. She pointed, not at anything in the room, but out the window, across the wide lawn to the old carriage house my grandfather had converted into a studio. Its upper window was dark. "The summer she taught me to paint birds," Elara said softly. As she spoke, as the words left her lips and entered the air between us, the light in the upper window of the carriage house went out. Not a fade. A snap. One moment it was a dull pane of reflected gray sky, the next it was a black, square hole. It happened the exact instant my eyes, following her pointed finger, landed upon it. I started. "Did you see that?" "See what?" she asked, her face blank, innocent. "The light. In the window. It just went out." She smiled, a thin, sorrowful curve of her lips. "That window hasn't had a light in 20 years. The wiring's rotten." She turned back to the room, leaving me staring at the dark square, my heart doing a clumsy stutter step. I could have sworn, but no. The gloom of the day, the trick of the cloud passing. Grief does strange things. But it happened again, an hour later. We were in the kitchen, surrounded by the debris of lunch. Someone was telling a story about Grandma's famous temper, about the time she'd thrown a burnt pie out the back door. Elara, leaning against the fridge, listened silently. As the story reached its climax, and it landed right in old Mr. Henderson's prize petunias, Elara's finger came up. She pointed out the kitchen window, to the specific patch of the now overgrown garden where the petunias had once been. My eyes followed her finger. The security light on the corner of the garage, a light that had been on all day due to the gloom, winked out. Darkness swallowed the garden patch at the precise moment my gaze arrived to survey the scene of the decades-old pastry crime. Coincidence? Faulty sensor? I was keyed up, suggestible. I started testing her. Not overtly, but I'd maneuver conversations, prompting memories from other relatives, watching Elara. She rarely spoke. But when a memory was voiced, a happy one, a sad one, it didn't matter, her hand would subtly lift. A finger would extend, pointing to some distant, related part of the landscape, the old swing set, the root cellar door, the particular tree someone had fallen from. And every time, without fail, as my eyes darted to the spot she indicated, a light associated with it would die. A porch light would extinguish. A solar path light would flicker and fail. The lamp in a distant neighbor's window would go dark. She wasn't causing the lights to go out. She was pointing out that they were already gone. Her gesture was a correction. She was showing me that the memory, by being spoken, was actively draining the present of its illumination. The past was a black hole, and recollection was the gravity pulling the lights of the now into it. The final test was my own. I found her alone on the back porch as evening thickened. "Tell me a memory of her," I said, my voice tight. "A happy one. Just for me." She studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded. "The Christmas she let us stay up to midnight. We drank ginger beer and she told us ghost stories that weren't scary." As she spoke, she raised her hand and pointed, not at the house, but at the sky, at a specific point above the bare-limbed oak where we'd strung lights one year. I looked up. A single, bright star was visible in the deepening violet. It went out. Not obscured by cloud. It was there, and then it wasn't. A pinprick of light vacuumed from the fabric of the night. I made a choked sound. Elara lowered her hand. You see it now, she said, not a question. What are you doing? I whispered, terror and awe cold in my veins. Nothing, she sighed, the weight of the world in that word. I'm just showing the cost. Every time you shine the spotlight on what was, you cast a shadow on what is. You turn off a light somewhere. She looked at the dark house, at the windows where the warm, electric glow of the wake still burned. They're in there, turning on all the lamps, telling all the stories. And outside, the dark is getting deeper and deeper, because they're feeding it. They're giving it all their light. I left that night. I couldn't stay. Every shared laugh, every remember when, felt like an act of vandalism against the present. Now, back in my city apartment, I am afraid to remember. I avoid old photos. I change the subject when friends reminisce. Because I see it everywhere now. An old song comes on the radio, a memory of a college road trip surfaces, and I'll catch myself glancing at a lamp. Sometimes, I swear, it dims. Just a little. Elara taught me to see the economy of memory. It's not free. Every retrieved moment is paid for with a flicker of now. She pointed to a window, and a light went out just as I looked. And now I know, the window was the past, and the light was a piece of my present. And she was the accountant, showing me the balance sheet, forever in the red. It wasn't my tiredness. That's what I need to make clear. My own exhaustion was a known quantity, a personal, internal weather system of leaden limbs and foggy thoughts. This was different. This was external. It seeped up from the city itself. It started on a Tuesday, a day of flat, gray light that seemed to press down on the rooftops. I was walking to the pharmacy, my usual trudge, when I felt it through the soles of my shoes. A vibration, not a rumble from the subway, but a slow, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat heard through a pillow. A deep, subterranean sigh. The sidewalk wasn't just hard, it felt drowsy. My footsteps, which usually echoed with a sharp, lonely clip, were absorbed, muffled, as if the concrete was too sleepy to send the sound back. I stopped. Looked down. The cracks in the pavement, usually stark and geometric, seemed softened, blurred at the edges. A dandelion stubbornly growing through a fissure had its head drooped, petals closed, as if napping in the midday gloom. That's when I heard the yawn. It came from a manhole cover 10 feet ahead. Not a sound of metal, but a long, low, resonant hoo, a release of stale, warm air that smelled of wet earth and distant machinery oil. The iron cover itself seemed to sag slightly in the middle, like a comfortable bed after a long sleep. The grating vibrated with the exhalation. It wasn't steam from a pipe, it was breath. The city was yawning. My skin prickled. I looked up at the buildings. The brownstones lining the street, usually standing with stern, attentive facades, seemed slumped. Their windows, the eyes of the city, were half-lidded. Blinds were drawn at odd, lazy angles. Curtains hung with a limp indifference. One window on the third floor of a particularly grand old house was open just a crack, and the curtain within moved not with a breeze, but with a slow, sleepy rhythm, in and out, like the flank of a sleeping animal. I started walking again, faster now, but the sensation pursued me. The fire hydrant on the corner leaned slightly, as if dozing against its post. The branches of a ginkgo tree hung lower than usual, their leaves still and heavy, not rustling even in the faint breeze. A stray cat, normally a coiled spring of alertness, was stretched flat on a low wall, its sides rising and falling in a deep, slow slumber. It wasn't just resting, it was participating. The pharmacy felt like the only awake place, buzzing with harsh fluorescent light and the jarring beep of the register. The brightness was an assault. I grabbed my things and fled back out into the soporific street. The walk home was worse. I passed a construction site, normally a chaos of shrieking metal and shouted orders. Today, it was quiet. The crane's arm was lowered, resting on the ground. The excavator sat in its dusty pit, its bucket resting gently on the earth like a hand on a pillow. The workers weren't on break, they were moving with a slow, dreamlike deliberation, passing bricks hand to hand in a silent, somnambulant chain. They weren't tired. The site was tired, and they were moving through its dream. I reached my apartment building. The front steps, which usually felt like a minor ascent, now felt like climbing into a warm, soft mouth. The lobby, usually a cold, echoing space, was warm and dim, the air thick and still. The mailboxes seemed to be sleeping, their little doors shut like closed eyes. I took the stairs, each step a labor, the very air in the stairwell feeling resistant, like wading through warm syrup. Now, in my apartment, I feel it closing in. The radiator, though cold, emits a soft, drowsy hum. The walls feel closer, softer, as if padded. The view from my window is of a street settling into a profound siesta. Cars are parked at gentle, lazy angles. A delivery truck is double parked, its engine off, and the driver's head is leaning against the window. Is he sleeping, or is the truck sleeping, and he is merely caught in its slumber? This is not a metaphor. This is a condition. The city is falling asleep. Not a dramatic collapse, but a slow, gentle sinking into a collective nap. My own tiredness is just a minor note in this citywide lullaby. The sidewalk is drowsy. The manholes yawn. The brownstones have heavy lids. And I am wide awake inside it, a single, frantic synapse firing in a brain that is deciding, brick by brick, pipe by pipe, to shut down for a while. The horror is not in being tired, but in being the only one who isn't. I am an insomniac in a sleeping metropolis, and the longer I stay awake, the more I feel the pull, the gentle, inexorable invitation from the yawning concrete and the sighing steel to just lie down, right here on the drowsy pavement, and join the dream. But I'm afraid that if I close my eyes, I won't dream my own dreams. I'll dream the city's dreams. And what does a city of stone and wire dream of? Nothingness, perhaps. A long, quiet dream of being untouched, unwalked upon, unlived in. A dream of returning to the quarry, to the silent earth, before the first foundation was ever dug. And in that dream, there will be no place for a man like me at all.
Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.